You are listening to Nabila Usman and Stephen Imediego at Kabafest.
Welcome back. It's still Now Breakfast, the Kabafest special here on Radio Now, 95.3 FM Lagos. We're coming to you live from, I've been wanting to say this, so this is my chance, from the ancient city of Kaduna. I mean, perhaps it's not so ancient because it is, the ancient city is more Kano. Thankfully, this man wants to talk because he was born in Kano. Stephen, go ahead.
It is what it is. Shout out to my people listening to us from Kano. If you're watching us on YouTube, you've made the right call because all the conversations that we've been having are curated there and you can always watch them. You can all just, tell your people to tune in live. Tell everybody in Sabongeri, which is the only place I remember in Kano, Airport Road as well.
Fake Kano boy.
Please allow me to call. But we are glad to be on your screens as well as in your ears this morning on Now
If
Breakfast.
you're fiddling with your phones at the moment to try to get our YouTube, just go to youtube.com. It's Radio Now Studio. You'll find the live link. And of course, you can join the conversation on social media across all platforms at Radio Now 953 FM. Again, I'm Nabila Usman with my co-host Stephen Imediegu, and at Kabafest 2024 this morning, we're joined by Abdulbasit Abubakar, a man who has come to redeem men, by the way, because all the poets we've spoken to this morning are women. We almost thought that, we had dominated the space. Would have been happy to. Abdulbasit, do you want to come in and perhaps defend the masculine honor?
You don't defend something that is already established.
Hey, my man, put it there. Put
You
it
see,
there.
this
Nice
is
one.
what they say when they don't have anything else to tell us. But Abdulbasit, I actually want to come to that, the gender conversation. I find it interesting because my experience of the literary space here in Kaduna is really that we have more female. I've seen more women perform poetry than men. It's not that the literary spaces aren't populated with men such as yourself. Maybe you've got an alternative view if you look especially across the north, because I know you've performed not just in Kaduna but in other states as well.
So for me, I personally believe, I'll go with what you said, that a lot of women in the literary space in Kaduna and in northern Nigeria generally. I've been to events in Kano, Abuja, here in Kaduna as well, and I have seen how a lot of women are coming out to speak through their poetry. So there's a very good representation. Maybe the platforms themselves are not really run by women completely, but there's a good representation of them in the space. And you hear the conversations they have in their poetry, talking about things that matter to them as women. So it's like a breath of fresh air to see that.
So poetry, I would say not just poetry, but art itself usually comes from, as we've heard, a place of experience, the environment that you find yourself in. And with a lot of the poetry that I've heard women perform, especially in the last few days of being here, you hear a different perspective. In some cases, you hear some level of pain, and it's not a pain that as a man I can understand because I've never experienced it. I don't know what that is. Do you think that the poetry spaces and the fact that female poets are speaking up is helping us to have a better understanding of this other half of the human race?
All right. So one of the things I'm very grateful for Kabafest and other platforms like it is the opportunity it gives for conversations. Now, when conversations happened, it's not like those problems just disappear, but it creates this scene where people are able to talk. Now, even if I was delusional before, I'll start to listen because this conversation will keep going. And when others see others doing it, they feel motivated to have those conversations. So what I have noticed is from when I began being in the space, there was a little reluctance of people to be able to tell their own stories, to talk about their pain, as you've mentioned, through their poetry. But over time, I've seen it grow, and people are able to see it. Not just see it, but try to understand it. Because I personally believe you can understand a person's pain to just a reasonable extent. To be able to establish empathy, to be able to see from their POV of what they feel they are going through. So those conversations have been going on, especially one of the more prominent art form or literary form that I believe is thriving in northern Nigeria now is poetry. It's like everywhere, like there's this, whether page poets or performance poetry, but there's this conversation that is happening. Even though you don't talk about it, but you come and you watch, it is infused in your head, whether you like it or not, because you remember those performances. Because gotta give it to the people that are out there that are doing amazing poetry, and amazing poetry would stick to your head. You remember it.
So I want us to explore Hausa language and poetry a little. First of all, let it be on record, I strongly believe that the heart of a poet is female. Strongly believe. That's what Stephen is touching on there, that he's not able, it's because it's female. There's the sensitivity, the intuition, the empathy, right? And I'm not saying that men aren't all these things, but really it is female. In the promo, the line you say is, when the Ayeri stops, the next thing you hear is, gas yakari. And Stephen has been wanting to find out what that line means. I know that you will perform for us in a moment, but let's talk about how you infuse, because actually it's a mix of English and Hausa for you, how you infuse the language into your poetry, and whether you find that up north there's a deeper connection when you perform in Hausa than in English.
So let's start from the beginning. Now, when I started performing poetry, I was just doing it in English. But over time, the poems started coming to me in the way I communicate day by day. Whenever I take people poetry classes, I like to ask them, what language do you think in? So for me, I like to believe that I think in those two languages. So it's easier for me to articulate it in words with those two languages as well. And yes, that aspect of, when I started, I was just exploring. To be honest, I was just experimenting. But the first time I performed fully an Engausa fusion of Hausa and English poem, there was this acceptance that it had. You could see it in the faces of the audience. So that's the thing I like to do. I like to read the room whenever I perform to see how do you feel about this poem. And I was so pleased by the reactions I got. So I said, why not go on? And I would like to believe that at the point where I started this, it was not popularized in that way. And over time, I started seeing other people adopt that methodology, especially in performance poetry, constantly doing. Now you see it even in page poems. People are infusing, I think some people in Kano even did a collection of poetry that is mainly in Gausa. So this acceptance that he has gotten with the community that I belong to has given me more push to go on with it. And even like the performance I did last Kaba Fest, I was just sitting and then the poem came. It came in English, but I knew I was coming to Kaba Fest. It was Kaduna, we have a majorly house audience. I needed to infuse that thing that makes it more relatable. So every single person, like immediately I posted that on Twitter, that particular part of Gasiak Ade. Every other person was able to relate to it.
And by the way, in this time, and Gas always finishes, by the way, Gas Yakari is Gas has finished. It finishes in the middle of your pot of, maybe in Stephen's case, his pot of beans. And then it finishes in the middle of the night or on a Sunday morning where shops are not open, so you actually have to wait.
Yes.
I can never say Gas has finished again. From now on, it is national. Gas Yakari.
Abdulbasit, see you. You're pushing Hausa to an Igbo boy.
Yeah.
All right, so Abdulbasit, I really want to hear you perform. I've been looking forward to that all morning, so I hope you're ready to go. I'm going to count you in if you need a countdown. In 5. This needs a proper introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, you're still on to Now Breakfast right here at Kaba Fest in the city of Kaduna. We're bringing to you a poetry performance by a man who thinks in two languages and performs in those two languages, the poet Abdulbasit Abubakar.
Yeah, Audu. katina sanda muke shiga cikin gari mai wasa, tell them not to worry. There won't be no crickets. There will only be bouncers that will give you exclusive tickets or front row concert of our childhood. How we swam through the Kogi and Rafi of our recklessness and careful strides and backstrokes into the Rafi of our carelessness. How we made wrong decisions but end up in the right way. Okay, the poem is not coming.
Let's explore the first few lines that you've just performed, right? Because there's Hausa words all over.
Yeah.
And I think one lightning rod for people is when you said Kogi, because all they're thinking is, why are you talking about Kogi State?
You know.
Which is part of where I'm from, by the way. And maybe this is a great opportunity to let people know that Kogi means river in Hausa language. We have, I think, up to 4 states in the country that have river somewhere in their names. So yeah, speak to us about the Hausa words that you've infused in this piece that you've just performed.
All right. So most people, of course, I believe it's in most part of the country, especially if you grew in low-class areas. There are things boys do. You go to the back end of the town where there are always small rivers. You go and swim. And it's like a major memorable part of your childhood with your friends. So infusing Kogi there, it's once you have that experience, you hear it and then it reminds you of those things that you did. And most times, like every single time, we don't have approval of our parents to go there. So that rebellion
is universal.
Yes. So it's that rebellion that is relatable for every other person.
This is where coconut head generation came from, just so you know.
Yeah. So, like, I like to use Hausa words that are very relatable. Not just random words, but words once you hear it sparks.
Essentially, by the time you have the translation, it's kind of like what you just described now. Stephen can relate to it, so it doesn't matter what part of the country you're from.
Yes. So, and there's a thing that I noticed with Ngausa. If you sit down to listen to the whole poem, even if you don't understand Hausa per se, you'll be able to pick what the story is telling you. So essentially, that storytelling process is very embedded in the performance. It's very embedded in the process. So once you listen, and that's what gives it that universality, even though it's in Hausa and English, you'll be able to pick the major things and then be able to relate to the story.
I was going to interject by using some of the Hausa words I've learned. Fairly recently, I learned jira. That's weight, right?
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
All I heard was jira.
You should listen closer.
That is not weight, it's jira.
Jira.
Yes.
I thought his R was.
Oh my
You
goodness.
got a lisp.
I'm really lost in translation.
When Stephen speaks Hausa, he has a lisp. R becomes D. Jida. Okay.
Jira.
He almost wants to say by your jida.
Oh my days. Right. So this is what I'm thinking at this time is I see this a lot even on social media. When South Africans tweet, those who speak Swahili, they go from a sentence in English and then 3 words to the end, it drops into Swahili. And hearing your poetry, the same thing. It starts out with Hausa, goes into English, and then somehow comes back into Hausa. I wonder if this style of speaking, this style of performing, if it was more popular amongst poets in Nigeria, would it be easier for us to understand each other's languages, each other's experiences, if we could bring that sense of self and present it and say, this is who I am. There is no hiding it. This is my language. This is my people. This is my culture. Will we get along better as a country if we are able to bring who we are into how we speak and just put it in front of people and let them judge?
All right, I'll start with a starter. Now, when I started having interest in spoken word poetry, even though I don't like to call it spoken word, I like to call myself a performance poet. Now, even when I started having interest, most of the people I was looking up to were people in the US and in the UK. It was not a popularized thing. Of course, there were people doing it in Nigeria, but it was not popularized then. So most of the people I listened to were over there. Now, as much as there are certain issues that are kind of relatable, it's different when it's contextually made Nigerian. Now, part of the things that gave me a strong push was seeing people who spoke the same language as me speak about the issues that I relate to in the ways that I communicate by default. Now, it's different when, okay, maybe I hear a black American talk about racism. I could, that emotional whatever would be there because, that's all of that. But it's different when I hear my brother or someone in Nigeria being able to talk about issues that have to do with us, police brutality, all of that, but in the languages that communicate most with us. So one of the things I like to do is, I kind of believe me, I'm not a poet who, writes about the big issues.
The big issues.
The big issues, but the smaller issues, because I believe the smaller issues are what would lead to addressing the big issues. Now, one of the things, because I'm from the north, now one of that poem I performed last year had so many layers of so many things. But when you listen to him, you only get the ones that relate to you most.
Like the identity is marriage.
Yes, marriage.
Right after the wedding ceremony.
There's talk about when he married the first, second, third, he took off his bulletproof vest. Now, if you take your bulletproof vest, what does that say? You're not immune to whatever would come to you. So because you're signing up for something. So if you know that you've already acknowledged that I've taken that bulletproof vest, so you have to take precautions to avoid bullets coming to you. So many other aspects like that. So I believe those things coming up and these conversations in the language that is most revered to us. Because a lot of us in northern Nigeria are not per se Hausas.
Right.
But Hausa is a dominated language which almost every other person has to know to survive, one way or the other. It's a survival skill, I believe in that. Because if you are in a particular geopolitical zone, having to be able to communicate easily would give you upper edges over the people who are not able to. It's a known fact all over the world.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Well, Abdulbasit, thank you very much for joining us and speaking with us today. You've inspired me to go out there and actually learn this language, which I feel I have a right to learn at this point. But thank you for your time, and we really look forward to watching you perform at Kaba Fest.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
And you're still listening to the Kaba Fest special live on Radio Now 95.3 FM Lagos. In a moment, Radio Now's Tomi Olubemi. Drum roll.
You are listening to Nabila Usman and Stephen Imedego at Kabafest.